Good afternoon. My name is Arvind Singhal. I'm the chairman of a company called the Knowledge Company, which some of you may know as Technopack Advisors in the previous avatar. That was till last year. I'm delighted to be the host of this first webinar, as we call it, the TKC Perspective. It's a series of webinars come physical events, which we normally do to highlight uh, more specific areas of focus which retailers and consumer companies should be looking at. But sometimes they tend to either completely ignore them or they don't go into as much depth as it might be needed. Today's theme, what we have chosen, is to focus on, if we call it the invisible leakages of profit or missed opportunities for profit optimization. You can see it both ways. You can see it like a leakage, or if you do the right things, you could actually improve your profit to some extent. As we know, energy costs are a very, very significant cost for most businesses. In retail also, it is not insignificant. People normally think about energy costs largely applicable to any, manufacturing industries, but even retail and especially large retailers, multi-locational retailers, it all adds up to a significant cost component in the line items there. And we thought we will pick up this topic today for our interaction. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce to you two very, very, if I may say, not only experienced but very relevant individuals who will be actually our subject matter experts as we go through the next 45, 50 minutes with you. Our first guest is Mr. Shankar Ramachandran. Shankar is maybe a chartered accountant, but more than a chartered accountant, he brings incredible amount of experience with some of the largest companies in the world, like Amazon included, Metro Cash and Carry, and currently he's a CEO of a very successful South India-based retailer called Mary Retail. You'll hear more of them, I'm sure, in the months ahead. There. Our second guest is Mr. Haps Dillon. Haps is an IIM alumnus, but more than that, he has more than 20 years of experience working in, in a sector which is a very, very, a sector which touches our lives. When you look into career as a name, it's a name which I think most of us know directly. Even if you don't know directly, hidden behind somewhere there is a career product which touches our life. Habs looks after career abounds operations in APAC, in EMEA. There. But more than that, he's got a great experience, especially in the context of deployment of technology, especially the Internet of Things, to see how do you get real-time intelligence as opposed to post-facto intelligence in terms of various aspects of operations of business. Today's focus, of course, is more on the energy-related operations, controls, and dashboards. But HAP's experience goes way beyond just looking only at the energy side of how technology can make your business more competitive and certainly, therefore, more profitable as well. So thank you very much, both of you, Shankar and Haps, for joining there. If you would wish, uh, just opening comment from both of you would be very useful. Shankar?
Uh, Arvind, I'm delighted to be part of this discussion. As a chartered accountant, my numbers are something which we really look at on the financial statement. With the priority is always above the line, and not when I say above the line, energy comes somewhere below. So it's only of late that the focus of most of the organizations have come into this particular sector, which hitherto were not something where the priority or the focus was so much. So this is a very refreshing discussion for me as well as part of this, and maybe after this I'll take notes back home and to see how we can actually go and mitigate some of these challenges which you're already facing here. Thanks a lot for getting me in here.
Thanks. Haps, a comment from you?
Yeah, Arvind, thank you for having this webinar. So, from my lens, energy efficiency is always a very enigmatic, area to deal with because we don't know how much to squeeze without compromising operations. At the same time, as you said, it's a significant number sitting on a P&L, So we also want to maximize the efficiency part of it. So unless we have a handle around it, which is objective, which is data driven, we tend to swing one way or the other. Like you can obviously compromise your operations and save a lot of energy. At the same time, let the energy flow unlimited and then take a hit on the profitability side. So I'm hoping during the course of this conversation, we'll dwell on some of these topics and find a way where the optimal balance lies.
Thank you very much. So let's get started because we have relatively limited time. Shankar, let me start with you with your background of audit numbers. We just talked about risk. Uh, you know, we talk about energy costs as a fixed line item. From your experience, how much of that cost is actually variable in some ways, which can be controlled? It's not fixed. We assume that fixed costs are something which you can't do anything about there. And is it because of lack of understanding about the subject? Is it about lack of awareness about what can be done there? What are your thoughts? You know, if let's say you are auditing the items and every expenditure, how you would look at energy as one of the cost items?
So thanks for this, Arvind. So considering the importance this particular topic has taken up of late, uh, a new terminology called energy risk has been kind of integrated in most of the organizations, especially where energy cost is substantial. So when I say energy risk, is the risk of spending too much on the energy side than what is really required. So to put it simply, how do you manage the energy risk? Most of the organizations, they're trying to see if we can produce more with less of that energy, and second, how much of this energy we can replace with sustainable um, green what do you call green energy. So these are the two things where organizations are more and more moving towards. But coming back to your question, I'm based on my experience, I can say that most of this topic is kind of not known. It's kind still a blind spot for most of the organizations. Like you have experts dealing with the inventory management, you have experts dealing on the supply chain side, you have experts dealing on the technology side. I'm yet to see experts managing the energy side of a business. And today, most of the organizations, the energy cost is the energy utility bill, which comes at the end of the month. That's it. But when I really go back in terms of my experience with both the retail as well as the industry chains, uh, what I come back with knowledge is energy is as dynamic as a gold price, right? So your bullion changes every minute. So is energy, depending on the demand load within the organization or the demand spikes, and again, which machinery, what kind of equipment is actually sucking more of energy. So these are all the factors which require very close monitoring, like you do with an inventory or you like do with your any other revenue or metric in your business. So my view is not many organizations are prepared for this. Not many professionals, talented professionals, are there to take responsibility for this energy cost. Based on my experience, if you really go look back, I have a bullet mark point almost around 25 to 30% of the energy cost is something which is not productive or which is maybe wasteful or could have been utilized better. So that's a probable number which I have in mind. That's because you really don't have those mitigating factors to kind of monitor and to nudge the power at the right places, and also to see how it can be utilized better. That could be reasons, could be one, you're not really integrated with technology in terms of how you monitor it. Most of the organizations have not invested there. Second, you don't have the kind of data to see which machine is taking more. Or third, you don't know whether those idle equipment which lies in the organization, for example, like your lift monitors or your POS servers or your printers, which seem to be idle, but then they keep sucking a lot of power. So there is no data or kind of a way where organizations can monitor this, and until that gets done, you still have to live with this 30 to 35% of cost being fixed and not variable. But most of the organizations now moving towards they're moving the compass to a situation where they started believing that energy cost is not a fixed cost but a variable fixed cost, which the variability depends upon how efficiently you kind of manage that. And that's something which there's a lot. If I had to ask me, there's a long way to go. Some organizations are kind of woken up, but many are yet to get up from the slump.
Thank you. Then it's something which, we talked about fixed cost and fixed variable cost. When I go back after this seminar, this is something I will start to see in various expense items for our clients or our own company, which we take for granted as are fixed. Are they really fixed, or is there a certain amount of variability in them which can then allow you to do something about it rather than just assume it is fixed? Perhaps question to you: do you see a sudden change or an urgency in companies to deploy AI and IoT, especially for companies and businesses which are located at multiple sites? What do you think is happening today?
Yeah. And so, what has happened traditionally is energy is largely seen as a big facility problem. Like you have a factory, okay, you will have an energy problem. And there you put
Yeah.
resources and the manpower and the systems to be able to manage that. We're talking about SCADA systems, we're talking about steel plants running their furnaces using some of those systems. But retail has been, in a way, little behind the curve on this. And it's only now, I think, we're starting to realize that once they achieve a certain scale, like I would say, even once they cross 50 or 100 outlets, the cumulative effect of energy at each outlet starts to look big. So, just an example, even if you're spending, let's say, 10 lakh rupees on a very 4,000 to 5,000 square feet outlet, but if you have 100 of them, suddenly you're talking about energy in crores. And that's where, it becomes a big number to deal with at the corporate office level, by the CFO, by the operations team. You have to budget for it, you have to plan for it. So we're seeing that is one momentum, that as retail is expanding in India, this energy as a cumulative cost is really becoming something that has to be dealt with. We're also seeing that over the last couple of years, the evolution of quick commerce and online. Now, that obviously has taken a little bit of footfall away from our traditional retail outlets. So, systems which were designed, or the energy footprint which were designed for these outlets, and the actual footfalls needs now to be little altered, right? So you need to be sure that during which day of the week are you likely to see higher footfall, what time of the day you have higher footfalls, and therefore you use your facilities to have that customer experience at the best possible level during those peak hours, and then perhaps go down in a little, as you call, energy saving mode when the traffic is not there. So this need for the facilities to be not just switch on and switch off, but to be adaptable based on the business cycles that are running, I've also seen, coming largely from the online and the quick commerce, getting into the whole retail space. Sustainability is another big driver, because I've seen almost all boards now at least having a vision of what they want to achieve in the coming years. And there's a strong focus on scientific, science-based target settings. That it's no more acceptable to say that I've saved 10% of my carbon footprint. It has to be auditable enough so that you have the confidence that the numbers are coming from what initiatives, how are they measured, and it becomes very objective reporting to the outside world. Last but not least, I'm also seeing a cultural change that as retail adopts more digital, ability to digest data across the function, not just to store planning or merchandising, but to every other function. Even the facility management function has become, more tech savvy, more data oriented, rather than traditional way of looking at buildings as engineering focus, right? You have a problem, you fix it with your engineering skills. Now they want to have more predictive insights. They want to plan their workforce in a way where they are not stretched supporting the store operations. So all these, I think, factors are coming together to bring the whole focus around energy efficiency, into conversations at the C-suite level.
Thank you. I think it's a good perspective. Only thing, in my opinion, is that till the time it actually reaches to the board itself or the very top level of management, it may end up becoming one more facilities management function to remain and may not get the right attention. That's the way I'm seeing also in some companies, that even if there's a conversation, it is not given the sufficient relevance, not on a regular basis, but at least on some frequency basis, so that it escalates right to the very, very top. And decisions are made collectively as opposed to just somebody in the middle trying to do something about it. But thank you so much. Let's go out to the operations aspect, of the retail businesses. Shankar, again, uh, your role as a CEO. One of the biggest complaints I hear from operations team is that they're constantly firefighting. Something is broken down and they have to rectify it. And before they've rectified it, something else breaks down. And as a result, it leaves very little time to be proactive about either anticipation or getting real-time intelligence that something is likely to break down. Do you find this challenge in your organization? And if so, uh, what kind of steps should retailers be taking to be proactive rather than reactive to challenges from time to time?
Yeah, this is a very good question, Arvind. I think it takes everybody's time and space on this particular topic. Despite how much you plan, reactive management is something which most of the organizations are living with today. And the real cost of this doesn't really come in the profit and loss account. The cost of reactive management is something outside the numbers, and it goes somewhere else. So, put it simple, I would like to put it this way. There is a huge cognitive stress on fatigue built into the employees because of this. Because very often you see them firefighting operations is not actually doing what they're supposed to do, rather, they're looking at fixing issues. And this impact is definitely going to be there on the sales on the customer side, where these are going to suffer. Most of the time the staff is looking at uh, firefighting within the four walls of the store. Look at it this way. Then the next step is, it first is going to impact your store morale, it's going to impact your store numbers, it's going to impact what happens in the store. And secondly, it's also going to have an impact on the customer experience as such. Typically, how does this firefighting happen? And I've been virtually witness to some of these events. All of a sudden, your power goes out, and then the store starts getting slightly hotter. The customers are getting angry, and then the call goes out to the vendor for escalation, and your POS is kind of goes into a pause mode. The billing queues are there, and then the store manager is into escalation mode. So typically, and then especially when you're looking at the fresh, there's a panic on the quality of freshness or the product stability. So typically, this is the kind of things which happen in a retail setup when there is a firefighting happening. So what happens then when these kind of things happen? The customer dwell time is also impacted. So where a store is slightly heating up or the AC isn't working, you can see a customer spending 15 minutes, he may be off by 4 or 5 minutes. The conversion rates reduce. So all this in effect affect your bottom line. But the costs are much more at the customer level, at the employee level is very high. And more important, what happens is I have seen it practically. This kind of it gets into the mindset of the people there, that yeah, let's accept this. this is how things are going to be, and any situations happen will be reactive than being proactive. So if you really look at the reasons why this happened, is there is not much of a time or much of a budget or departments for preventive maintenance. So this is one of the biggest root causes for these kind of things happening. One, second, the asset quality, wherever you have the assets, be it your compressors or your motors working, the health of this is not checked very often. And third, you really don't have a dedicated team which goes periodically visit the stores and checks his maintenance and leaves the store staff alone. So these are the root causes for this kind of firefighting happening across the store. And in terms of impact, it's not so much on the it might not look so much on the P&L, but the real impact is on the morale of the people and customer experience. And thirdly, even we have seen in many cases these kind of things kind of recur, and it is taken as status quo without much of a fixes. Net, how do you ensure that these kind of firefighting issues doesn't happen? One, put in place a solid system where you give enough time for maintenance. That's when during the off season or during the customer non-peak season, that's when issues around the assets or issues around those equipment are taken care of. Number two, have an emergency team which kind of for a cluster of stores, which kind of attends as and when an emergency occurs, leaving the store manager and the people within the store fighting day in and day out these kind of issues. So if I have to look back at why this is happening, it is happening because one, there is not so much of knowledge or information within the management uh, about the react costs around the reactive management more than what is required on the proactive side. So this, in my opinion, are some of the reasons why this firefighting is a norm, and not that it is something which can be avoided. In most of the mature organizations, they have come to a situation where these kind of maintenance or these kind of health checkups of the equipment, of the assets of the store happens more often, and to large extent it is kind of fixed. But in medium retail organization or a small retail organization, I've seen many cases where the store managers and the staff are there to fight their own battles, leaving the impact on the customer experience, the sales, as well as the overall bottom line. So this is something which is a function of the maturity of the organization, where it is going, and rather than where the organization right now is.
Very well said, because sometimes what happens, people only focus on the measurable financial loss, the intangible, and therefore which could lead to indirect loss, like we talked about customer experience, employee stress. It's not measured, and therefore people don't think it is worthwhile a problem to look into. I'm just curious to know, uh, you used the word firefighting. Is there anything like a fire drill kind of an exercise at least some of the larger retailers can do to simulate some of these breakdowns in, let's say, after the store hours or otherwise, and then actually train the people to anticipate as to what action to be taken? Is it done as a practice?
Yeah, I think most of the organizations it is happening, but again, it's not happening at regular cadence, or again, it's the whims and fancies of the department which are supposed to done. Most of the time, when this kind of gets nudged to the store, it's not a priority to the store. Number two, the store guys are more busy with their other priorities than looking at this. So this kind of goes at a tick in the box rather than being fulfilling the real purpose of what it should be doing. So what happens? Number one, the store guys are really not connected to what is happening. Second, they're really not educated on the real lifetime situation. What are the actions to be taken when something like this happens? So, you said, there are those regular fire drills or fire exercises which happen in most of the retail companies. But I've seen, based on my experience, that that is taken as a time off for the store guys rather than trying to learn what is to be done in a real life situation. So to that extent, yes, it's still a formality to be done, not that it has achieved the purpose it should have been achieved. Yeah. But
Right.
how much so you
Harms.
plan, how much so you plan, how much so you kind of prioritize. Firefighting is a norm. Only thing is the extent to which it varies depends on organization to organization, store to store. But considering the profitability of the store is the store manager's prerogative, these issues are bound to be there. And where they try and cut corners, they try and kind of minimize those costs. So these issues are bound, unless and until it is centrally managed, these issues are bound to be there. So the solution here is in some of the organizations where you have a cluster or a geography, these decisions are left to a regional manager or a store manager, and they have their own budgets driving the businesses. But if it actually goes back and then kind of gets centralized, to a large extent, I think these power issues can get fixed. Plus, there is a regular audits happening and there's a regular maintenance checks happening. At the same time, you kind of keep shifting people from one store to another. From this perspective, it should kind of help.
Understood. Well said. Perhaps the question to you now is that how does the real-time energy data help operations team act faster than waiting for retroactive utility bills? So, we all talked about expenses. We also talked about being retroactive rather than being proactive in operations breakdown. From an energy point of view, what do you think is the current situation and what needs to be done about it?
So if that energy is it's an indicator of the operations health of a retail network. So the energy needs to be in that right balance for the operations to be running in their more optimal. If energy is high, then that optimal limit, we know something is wrong. And as Shankar was saying, if it is low, then that optimal limit, we know somebody is cutting a corner or some equipments are broken down because if they're not going to be working, they're not going to be using energy. So keeping an indication of that health of a network, energy is a very good tool to get it. And the more real-time view you get on the health of the network, I'm sure faster decisions that Shankar spoke about can be taken. It's just like how we put on glucose monitors on a body. They give us immediate feedback about surge in glucose, and that allows us to adapt our food habits. Same way, real-time data on energy gives exactly the same kind of leverage to the management team, both at the center and at the regions, to act faster. A utility bill coming, let's say, 2 months later, will hide perhaps most of these inefficiencies of what happened, why we had a high energy, low energy. There's nothing you can do about it. It's already a cost that is hit your P&L. At the same time, doesn't allow management to dissect it in a way that they can even take a meaningful insight out of it. So that's where the real-time data allows us to get a handle. We can see patterns. We can start benchmarking our stores which are showing the right balance on the energy usage side. They become the yardstick for us to compare why some other stores are not able to achieve the same level of efficiencies. So through this real-time feedback going across the network, you are able to then pick up opportunities where possibly little bit of more effort, training, processes can come in place to lift the efficiencies for those set of stores. Similarly, real-time data, as again Shankar said, allows us to fix a problem which can increase in magnitude over a period of time. So if you look at food service or if you look at groceries where you're actually storing very expensive stock in temperature controlled environment, if there is a breakdown of an equipment, that temperature will not suddenly hit the room temperature. It will take some time to move to a higher limit and will reach ultimately a threshold point where it start damaging the product. But you do get a reaction time of a couple of hours, for you to be able to take action if you have real-time data. So perhaps you can move the stock from one, storage case to another during that period while you're trying to fix that equipment. This only happens if there's real-time information and your team gets that lead time to act on it. If you're only going to find out about that incident, one day later, there's obviously the damage is already done in this case. So I think real-time data, especially if you have a large network, is really the most essential piece for us to get a visibility on the operations and the health of the operations as they run through the network.
Thanks. So let's shift a little bit more to the subject. You talked about large locations, distributed locations. What are the challenges of operating at scale? Uh, you know, there are a number of retail businesses in India which are, if not pan-India, but even within the region, have 150, 200 store locations. And some of them are very large ones, including 40, 50,000 square feet each. Shankar, my question to you is that when you're managing such large number of locations, 50 or more, consistency becomes a real risk factor in terms of experience, in terms of operations, in terms of merchandise management, and so on and so forth. From your perspective, how hard it is to enforce performance standards across such a fragmented network? What kind of processes can work? Is it still manual? Is it automated, or is it a combination of that? What works and what doesn't work?
So
And
Arvind,
if
I
I can
think
say so, I've seen some of the good multinational companies also, two locations in Gurgaon. The experience can be so different. The product quality can be different if it is food services, for example. So, how does one handle that?
this is a difficult question, not an easy question. Again, it's an easy question, not a difficult question. I'll say. So for me, because I've been with some of those leading multinationals. What you say is absolutely right. Uh, where I have seen a lot of manual work, and I've seen a store manager sitting for almost 20% of his time. His job is only to sign all those reports which come from. We have a logistic control department which gives the details of the sale made, the purchase made, what is the buffer required, and what is the reorder. With so many departments, he's got a pile of documents. His job is to sign those documents every day. And he also knows that these signatures or sign-offs are only ornamental in nature. So nobody's going, it's only for, again, a tick in the box. So if you ask me, these manual processes, number one, are not scalable. They're very unstructured, and they cannot support an organization which is growing linearly, because these cannot grow in a linear fashion. And
Yeah.
and especially this happens when the fragmentation becomes much more of a challenge, and it kind of bursts out when you have uh, a dispersed geography of dispersed location network of stores located various places, because there's not one solution which fits each of the store. There are different decisions to be made there. There are different categories of customers there. The catchment of customers differs. The product differ. So if and when the store manager has to take a decision, uh, it flows through a manual document as a report. It comes with some data to the reporting authority for interpretation, and then based on that, the escalation happens and the action happens. So by the time there is so much of latency in the entire decision making process that the problem is gone, it's come and gone. The customer knows the problem is there, and it's not fixed. But from a manual perspective, when you look at all these documents, you have a problem reported, the problem is solved, it's escalated, it is resolved. So your data says this problem, whatever has come, has been resolved. So overall summary of the problem situation for an organization is, yes, there has been an average performance of a store. There is a minor problem which is solved. That is because of the manual records. But actually the customer knows that it is a huge issue which he had faced and he had no other option. So
Right.
the entire process becomes very bureaucratic. It's not scalable, non-linear, and then there's so much of latency. And this is what is called as a organizational physics. It is not an issue which is it's with the culture or the organization. It is because the system doesn't support. It's a systemic issue. So until and unless the whole process is driven through a network where the documentation, where the right from the time a request happens or a issue happens till it's resolved, you have a trail on the system. Manually, it's impossible to escalate. It's impossible to resolve today. Difficult to manage. It can still be managed, like Dylan talked about a 50 store, but in my view, not more than 20 stores can be managed manually today. And again, within a very limited geography, more than that, we are in for chaos. So, if you ask me, if there are organizations which are moving there, not many organizations have moved to the extreme of completely depending on systems driven inputs, outputs, escalations, and actions. There are still a lot of action happening on the manual side. That is because historically the organizations have been built that way. They really cannot diverse from where they are to a completely system driven outfit. One, because the culture is something which has to be reset. Second, you don't have enough people who actually are, completely educated to use those system driven activations to resolve issues. In terms of whether we have moved that far, I don't think most of the organizations, even the best of the organizations, have still a lot of manual work going around in the entire organization. That is because psychologically someone gets a satisfaction if he signs a paper and this paper moves from one end to another, because all the data on the system is not cannot be seen and the distance cannot be measured. So I've still heard or some of those typical retail businessmen who actually handle a lot of stores, that if the guy sits in front of the computer and start doing it, he says, hey, you're not working. So they expect people to be physically on the store, use the papers, send it across, and that's what action is. So we're still, yeah, large organizations, multinational organizations which are evolved, matured, and moved to that almost that extreme of driven by systemic network and less manual interventions. But still, those small set of retailers, one, they're very cost conscious. They think it's a huge investment investing in systemic environment. So they have that psychological satisfaction of still driving the organization to the manual interventions, which to my knowledge are not scalable and it's not worth the effort, especially when you have a large stores with a disperse network. But we are in India, we are slowly changing, but I think we'll be reaching there in some time soon.
Thanks, Shankar. Maybe offline sometime we'll meet and we'll talk about this very unique Indian characteristic. This is the way it is done in India, and it justifies our not wanting to change. Whereas, there are good examples to be seen from somewhere else there, but some other time. Has my question to you related to this very interesting oversight which Shankar has given. Do you think unified visibility to the operators, it's almost like a control room of sorts, where whatever is happening through the network, it gets escalated to the right decision maker, but also is shared transparently with other guys in the network so that they all learn rather than manuals being made as to what to do later if there's a problem or otherwise. So how does unified visibility allow operators to function more efficiently, and how technology can play a role in that?
So I think Shankar highlighted very well that the opaqueness or the lack of visibility really constrains our operations. And on the retail side, we also seen there is a lot of churn on the actual manpower who's involved in retail operations. So even if you set up a very strong practice, it's not necessary that the practice will be carried forward in that store or outlet, consistently. So this is where the technology comes in. So today, we have technologies that can easily allow us to get that unified visibility. At the same time, the technology also allows you to essentially drive operations centrally without any local manual dependence. This is not to say that you're taking the control away from the local store manager or the local technician, but you're essentially saying that, hey, we are going to push a certain set of policies across the network, which will be driven through a centralized technology backbone. And then, of course, if based on your need, based on something that is an exception, you can always override that technology for a certain period of time to manage the situation, but then the system again will essentially run the operations. So this really, on one hand, allows for that consistency across the network. At the same time, takes that burden of working around these non-essential aspects away from the local store team. They can focus more on the customer side of things, on making a good experience for the footfalls that are happening in the stores. So we've been noticing that a lot of large retailers are moving on this side. They're centralizing certain basic policies, like for example, when should my signage be lit up in my store? Now, very simple thing, but it depends on where you are in India right now, because our sunset, sunrise times will be changing. We have different seasons, climatic zones in India. You can't have one universal time that at 6 p.m. all my signages across the country needs to be up, right? That's not the most efficient way. But if you have a smarter system where you're using weather feed, you're relying on the actual live data of how much sunshine is available, you can actually push out a differentiated schedule for different stores. This can be done by technology, and this change can happen differently over the course of the year, during summers, during winters, during monsoon. So centralized technology infrastructure will allow you to manage this. Again, we saw during COVID time how this came in very handy, because there were very short notice disruptions that are in a particular area. Suddenly the store operations needs to be curtailed, or the operations were supposed to be completely shut down as well, for certain time. So having the technology allows you to do that management remotely, instead of having to then actually go into the store and physically, switching on and off the equipment. So this both visibility and control through a central unified, team or command center is, I think, the way forward for running more efficient retail operations.
Related question to you, perhaps only. So when AI takes over the management of set points and runtimes, what is the tangible financial impact retail organization can expect? I mean, today there's bloodbath for IT companies, SaaS companies because of Claude, the new plugins. But on a more serious note, what could be the impact on retail businesses, and hopefully the positive one?
Yeah. So again, when we look at the impact, we tend to quantify it in various steps. It's not a one-time impact; it's a continuous impact. At the very basic, is the prevention of very avoidable leakages. Like if you're running a retail operation, running 1 hour beyond your customer hours, some of the your equipment, it could be your cooking equipment, it could be your air conditioning equipment. Just running 1 hour extra in a day is about 4% extra energy. It's just straight maths. So if you can have technology that allows the equipment to be switched off, for example, at very defined times when the store shuts operation, rather than having the store manager finish all other paperwork, all other distractions, and come back and take a decision, you save 4%. But just automation, it's like immediate savings. Same is for set points. So you have air conditioning, you're able to maintain a temperature even 1 degree better. It gives you another 4-5% savings, because sometimes what happens is you have a hot day, the store manager did take a call to get the set point lower, but then that low temperature set point is going to run for many days, even though the conditions would have improved outside. With technology, you pull it back. That there are linkages drawn between outside air temperature, your zone temperature, and you can override that whatever small time set point change that you did. So these savings again tend to come in very quickly into the program. But there are other savings which are more data oriented. For example, how do I know that this machine, an air conditioner, that is giving me the right comfort, but is it giving me at the right efficiency? That's hard to detect. For a store manager, obviously he will complain if that equipment is not working or if it is feeling too hot. But if that machine is giving him the comfort, but at 20% higher energy cost, he is not the person to flag that off. That's again something where technologies allows us to monitor the health of the equipment, raise those early flags that, hey, this machine is moving away from its operating standard, and we need to look at some maintenance actions on that equipment to bring it back to the efficiency. Now this comes in as the AI gets trained on more data from the store. Is not something you can expect on the first day of rolling out technology. As we go further into the programs, the bigger decisions like, hey, do I need to replace this equipment? It's already 6 years old. Or can I sweat this equipment more because the kind of output I'm getting and the type of energy that it's consuming, that could form a very good basis. So again, it's a capex avoidance opportunity. At the same time, it's a capex planning opportunity that comes in once you know that an equipment has more life left, or sometimes we've even called out that for some reason it's better to replace that equipment even though the anticipated life is 7 years, but somehow much earlier the equipment has degraded so much that the cost of replacement is going to be actually less than operating that equipment for a few more years, because the maintenance and the energy cost is going to just eat into the day-to-day operational cost of that equipment. So savings are like layered. They'll come in waves, as we like to call it, and the longer you run the program, more savings you tend to get from such a program.
Got it. So now let's shift to the last segment of our conversation, which is about sustainability and compliances. Shankar, my question is to you. On one side, compliance is regulatory pressure. So I can understand that the boards are looking at sustainability, ESG is one of the areas to look into there. At the same time, very less data still is there. I mean, I sit on a few boards myself. We talk about it, but in terms of how to measure end to end your footprint and how to improve sustainability is a tougher question. And it becomes more difficult for retailers which are very distributed in locations. For a manufacturing organization, X number of manufacturing touch points, Y number of vendors, which is finite, somewhat easy to track, somewhat, I'm saying. What do you think retailers like yourselves ought to be doing or are doing on this theme of sustainability? What kind of data capture and then what kind of actions?
Yeah, this is again a very tricky question, Arvind. If you really look at this, I think somewhere in 22, 23, SEBI had made this mandated BRSR, where uh, issues around energy consumption, energy emissions, ESR goals that we measured and quantified and should be reported by. But really, you look at the real time scenario in India today. Coming to the retail side, not many big retailers are still listed and within those top 1,000 companies. I'm only talking from a regulatory perspective right now. I'm not talking from a
Yeah,
practical perspective, right? So you're talking about, if I get your question right, you're talking about the gap between measurement and estimation. Am I right? Yeah.
yeah. So one is regulatory, which in any case we have to do, and there is some
Yeah.
gap. But more importantly, I think sustainability is a part of life. We have to adopt it, and therefore, what retailers can be doing about it.
Yeah, I think it's important that we kind of get to capture the data at the root, and kind of build it on rather than estimate. So those measurement networks or measurement infrastructure, if you ask me, still in most of the organization is work in progress. They really still organizations are not kind of evolved to kind of capture, record, analyze all those pieces of data which requires for an absolute measurement of energy saving, or maybe the emissions and the related ESG impact. So most of the organizations have still not evolved there. Uh, Yes, maybe in times to come, it will be there. But if you really ask me, if you ask, if I take a step back on this question, how much, how many, or which boards are really reactive to this? Still, this topic is under the table with almost 99% of the boards. It's only those 1 or 2% of the boards who are very active on this. So, unless and until the push comes from there on top, this is not going to really change overnight because to most of the organizations, still not a priority. ESG is still not a priority as of now. And That's the reason why the move has come from regulatory authorities onto the boards and down to the operating teams. But left to themselves, this will take some more time to go. But in terms of where the organizations are on this, they're still nowhere close to an accurate measurement and accurate reporting of all those energy consumption and emissions as of now. And still, I am private to some of those organizations where year on year it goes with the board report. 9 out of 10 times it's estimated. They give a justification. There is a sunset clause, and the commitments are given to the board that next year we'll do it. But it's still not a matter of priority to answer your question. Hopefully, it should happen with. Look, in India, everything happens top down. If the regulator is kind of tightening the screws, everything else will happen. Otherwise, happy go lucky. So that's my one word answer to your question. Maybe I'm slightly blunt on that, but that's a fact on the real ground.
I couldn't agree with you more. A lot of our changes are forced upon us rather than proactively we look into saying that we need to be doing that. Thank you so much for being so candid about this thing. Let's take a few questions now because we have about 9 minutes left for our session today. Perhaps there's a question which has come for you. What we have discussed today so far, does this approach, especially measurement, Internet of Things, energy management through controlled common dashboards, does this approach also work for small format stores like QSRs and coffee chains, or is it applicable only to large format stores? Would you have a view on that? Because as we know, for every 40,000, 50,000 square feet for one store, there are 20 stores which are in the range of 2, 3, 4,000 in India. That's the nature of retail business. Is this applicable to small format stores?
Yes, certainly it is applicable across various formats. What we really need to work is how you design this program catering to the needs of that format. So you could have a coffee chain which may still be very intense on, a lot of refrigeration and cooking equipment, etc. So we need to figure out where the energy footprint sits for that store and tailor the program accordingly. You may have another similar size retail store, but on footwear or on fashion, where obviously refrigeration and cooking load is not there. So the focus might entirely be on air conditioning. So when you look at a program of technology, you can't have one fit all kind of approach that, hey, this works, equally well for all. You really need to, look at where the opportunity sits, and based on that, be able to design the program, keeping in mind the business benefits that we're trying to generate and the cost of implementing this program. A lot of times you've seen going too uh, broad in our charter earlier on, you know is a bit of a dampener for the management, because when you go back to them after 6 months, hey, what have been your results, you are sort of all over the place, right, as the operational team. Whereas if you've been more focused that, hey, through technology I'm going after this one specific or these two specific problem areas, and these are the real visible benefits that come out of it, programs like these get more funding, they get more management, mind share as we go forward. So I believe a tailored approach is what I would suggest for various formats based on where their opportunity lies.
A question for you, Shankar. Store managers, you talk to anyone, I'm sure yours as well, they will always say that, look, I got more work than what I can handle. Do more dashboards, more real time data. Would it add to their workload or would it actually impact? And you can tell them it's actually going to make your life easier and therefore you get more acceptance from them. What is your instantaneous reaction to this?
No, if you ask me, store manager is there to ensure that the customers are taken care of, the store performs, and it optimizes the business. Store manager is
Yeah.
not there to police, store manager is there to perform. So the moment you kind of take the load off from the store manager, from other than business, sales, customer, uh, that's going to be an ideal situation. So if you ask me, store manager should be someone who should be there responsible for the administration, where we have a set of people who report to him. But bulk of his time should be going around customer experience, getting the right refills, connecting with the vendors, and making sure that we are actually there in terms of performance rather than all other looking at the reports or glossing over the reports. Get even I'm somebody who is against the store manager having regular meetings with store people. You can have a cadence of maybe once in a week, but a store manager, in my view, should be preferably they should be more around the business, not the non-business activities.
And therefore, the point you made a short while ago, maybe a centralized or a regional centralized
Yes.
control of the background operations probably might be the best solution for that rather than trusting everything on the store
Absolutely.
manager itself.
Absolutely. So
Got
typically,
it.
you have a central
So,
central team where you have maintenance, HR, administration. Everything is kind of part of the store team. It reports to the central management. Store managers 90% of the time goes on execution and customer and demand management than anything else. That's an ideal situation. Yeah.
understood. Perfect. So before we conclude, just uh, one liner, if I may say so, from both of you there. So Shankar, one thing which the leader should be doing differently, because our focus today is energy and risk and governance there. Any one message for the leaders, what they should be doing differently than what they're doing today?
So, Arvind, I don't think energy is any longer a operational metric. It's a compliance-driven risk signal, if I had to put it in those words. And it's more about financial volatility. It's more about it's not more about financial or operating volatility. It's about governance, risk, and compliance today, and we don't have any choices around it.
Okay. Perhaps a question for you again to close. One thing leaders should change about how they adopt AI and IoT in particular.
Yeah, so my recommendation would be that the programs delivers very tangible short-term benefits, but if handled well, it can be a real differentiator in the long haul to take out a lot more operational benefits. So as a leader, you need to build the program as a data-driven program rather than just focusing on, hey, what do I get as immediate benefits from a program like this?
Okay, got it. So, my own take has been, if I were to summarize, that we can no longer think of managing as the retail businesses become larger in terms of physical distribution and physical reach across the country. We cannot manage them location by location as hundreds of individual problems. Certain amount of unified management, unified information collection is probably the way to help the store managers perform what they're supposed to do, as Shankar very clearly articulated. But yet that the problem has to be seen collectively rather than discretely. This is what my understanding has been. Thank you very, very much, Shankar. And perhaps it has been a learning for me as well. There. Thank you for taking your time out and sharing your vast experience with our audience here. You have a good day and see you again. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Shankar.
Thank you.